When Emoji was only 6 and her sister was 4, they were at their father's for the weekend. Emoji's sister was laying on the couch, while Emoji was laying on an airbed. Emoji asked their father if he could turn the light off. Once he was asleep, Emoji and her sister sat awake, smiling and giggling, until a loud bang was heard on some glass. They slowly looked out the window, but nothing appeared to be wrong, until it came. The beast had red eyes, long black hair, a black turtleneck sweater, and a white face with blood in its hair. He banged on their window, his red eyes glaring at them. Emoji's sister screamed as Emoji ran around, locking up the house to keep whatever it was out.
This may sound gross, but Pandora craved 50W motor oil when she was pregnant. She would sip from the bottle like it was a milkshake. During both of her sisters' pregnancies, one of them ate a lot of hot, spicy foods. The hotter, the better. It would give Pandora heartburn and indigestion just watching her. Then her sister would chase the whole thing with pickle juice. Not the pickles, just the juice. To answer that burning question, she had 2 girls.
One time when Zaraganba was eating at a restaurant with his friends after a long day at work, the waiter came up to the table to ask for drink orders. Zaraganba decided to have 1 tea and 1 water. The waiter asked him what he wanted to drink, and he held 2 fingers up and said, "I want 1 tea." But he realized he had too many fingers up, so he put down his index finger and said, "And 1 water." His friends stared at him while he sat there, flipping off the waiter as he made his order. He eventually realized and apologized. Luckily, the waiter laughed instead of being offended.
Animations isn't even pregnant, nor has she ever been. Yet she loves putting salt on her ice cubes and eating it. And she's been doing this ever since she was 7. It burns her skin, but according to her, as someone who plays bass guitar and who constantly gets peeling skin on their fingers, this is actually a good thing. It makes your fingers really smooth. She's doing it right now. Kinda wish she would stop though.
One day at school, Ramona and her crush were sitting at a table with her friends. Ramona's best friend knew about her feelings and whispered that she should find a creative way to tell him. Without thinking, Ramona turned to her crush and stared right at him, trying to tell him with telepathy. He noticed and stared right back. The others thought it was a staring competition, so they started cheering the 2 of them on. Ramona finally blinked, and he smiled and told her nice work, but then he randomly said yes. Ramona totally forgot why she was staring at him in the first place, but then she noticed her friend holding up a sign that said, "She's asking you out."
So Hellbent met this girl on a dating website. They talked for 2 days straight, seemed to hit her off. She didn't have a profile picture, but described herself as attractive. They lived quite close to each other, so arranged to meet at a restaurant called Outback. Hellbent met her that night, and she wasn't at all what he was expecting. She was at least 380 pounds and had 2 double chins. Not wanting to seem rude, Hellbent sat down with her and tried to make the best of it. They started to look at the menus when Hellbent's date suddenly pulled out a Big Mac from her purse and began to gobble it down right there and then. At that point, Hellbent left and drove away on the spot.
One of Tolop's biggest secrets is that he has a nighttime ritual that takes place in his neighborhood. Tolop likes to wait until the middle of the night and then walk around his neighborhood with no clothes. It's a pretty quiet neighborhood, so he walks around like he's the only person in the world, sometimes even stopping to lay down in people's front yards and in front of their doors. Thankfully, no one's ever caught him on a naked stroll. Yet.
Sidious was once serving a customer when he looked out the window to see 2 people parking a golf cart in the parking lot. The man stepped out of the golf cart and proceeded to take off his pants and throw them into the golf cart and ran into the store. The passenger was a little girl who got out of the cart and ran after him. Everyone watched as the girl was screaming for the man to put his pants back on. However, the man refused. The girl then tackled the man to the ground and forced him to put his pants on. Then she grabbed onto his hand and managed to pull the man out of the store. They haven't been around the store again since then.
Ghost Toast could have used this piece of advice when he was alive Toast. One day this crazy guy told him that if you get stabbed, you should keep the knife in. But if you stab someone else, then make sure you take the knife out. It's definitely good advice for anyone thinking of getting into the serial killer business.
Spinal Palm accidentally went to class without putting on any deodorant. It was a really hot summer's day, so he sat in the back row with his arms glued to his sides, hoping that no one would find out he was stinky. After a while, Spinal Bomb's mind started wandering. He became really curious about what his sweaty armpits would taste like. So, while being as stealthy as possible, he pulled his shirt to his mouth and started licking the armpit. His teacher immediately caught him and said,
"Hey, Spinal Palm, does that taste good?"
Before he knew it, the whole class was laughing at him, and he developed a reputation as an armpit-licking weirdo.
About a year ago, Mimi had a weird dream where she was in Tokyo. She was sitting on a bus with her classmates when it drove into a building, killing Mimi and her classmates. However, her soul rose out of the wreckage and took over Batman, who was trying to pull the bus out from the building with his bare hands. Then Mimi's soul jumped into a Japanese detective who had a female assistant. The detective was investigating the crash, believing that it was caused by gang members who used octopi and starfish as money. Then Mimi, still in the detective's body, found a lead that took her to an apartment. All over the walls in the bathroom, she saw octopi starfish symbols. That was when she woke up.
Hellbent once went on a date that went really well. Shortly after the date, he had to have an operation that left him in the hospital for a few months. When he finally got out of the hospital, he asked the girl out again, and she said yes. They went to a Chili's, and things were going well. Hellbent's stomach started making noises, but he kept trying to ignore it. Just after their meals arrived, Hellbent couldn't hold back anymore and vomited blood all over the table and passed out. He woke up in the hospital and texted his date to say sorry. He never got a reply. One day in middle school, Ramona was on the phone with a new friend. They were talking about names for Ramona's new cat. Suddenly, Ramona's dad burst through the door and screamed, "Girl, was it you who took a huge dump and didn't wipe her flush?" Ramona didn't have time to mute the phone, and her friends started laughing. Ramona began to cry of embarrassment and hung up the phone. It worked out though. Ramona's dad felt bad and let her stay up late that night, and Ramona became best friends with that girl.
Spincess met the love of her life, Tolop, by complete accident. She had just graduated from college and was living alone after a bad breakup. One night, Spincess was feeling a bit down, so she decided to send text messages to a bunch of random numbers. Tolop was the only one who responded. They chatted for a while and discovered they had heaps in common. It turned out they lived pretty close to each other, so they arranged to hang out and go to a metal concert. They had such a wild night they decided to be boyfriend and girlfriend, and the rest, as they say, is history.
When Dolan was walking home one night, he ran into a strange man wearing a hoodie. The man approached Dolan and asked if he had seen a demon before. Obviously, Dolan said he hadn't, so the man replied by slowly saying, "I can show you one, if you want." After that, he didn't even do anything. He just walked away cackling to himself.
Honeybits used to believe that people died because of her walking. Her brother told her that every time you take a step, someone in the world dies. So she yelled at her whole family to stop walking and started bawling her eyes out when they didn't listen. Those monsters! As someone who has personally lost a lot of friends to random family members walking places, I sympathize.
When Spinal Palm was 17, he was walking down the street once when a guy crossed the street and ran directly towards Spinal Palm. The guy was catching his breath when he told Spinal Palm he just really wanted to read the writing on his t-shirt since he couldn't see it from afar. Spinal Palm said, "No problem," and they had a little conversation about his shirt, where he got it from, and all the different colors it comes in. After a couple of minutes, the guy said thanks and continued on his way. Spinal Palm kept walking, and it was only when he reached the next street he realized that his shirt literally had no writing on it. Pretty weird.
When Pringle was 7 years old, he came home from school earlier than expected. He just really had to go to the bathroom, or else he would surely poop in his pants. He called out and knocked on the door, but nobody was there. He went into crisis mode. It was either get his pants full of poo, or find a place to do his business. He chose the second option. He decided that the best place to do this was next to his garden. He also had no toilet paper, so he used pages from his school notebook. While cleaning his ass, he heard someone laughing. A kid and his friends were standing there watching him. Things got worse when a cop passed by. He called Pringle's mother, and she had to pay for her son's public indecency.
When Tolop was 10, he and his mom went to Pizza Hut. Everything was going fine while they were waiting for their meal, but after his first bite of pizza, Tolop's gut immediately started to churn. He felt really weird. Without any warning, Tolop's guts emptied themselves all over the table, including their meals. While he was vomiting, everyone in the restaurant stopped and stared. Suddenly, Tulip realized his bowels were about to vacate themselves in a similar fashion, and he ran as fast as he could to the toilet. Once he finished destroying the toilet, he and his mother made a hasty exit and went straight home.
Business where Nixium worked started losing clients. Nixium's boss asked him to do something outrageous. He told him to get in his car and spend the whole day stalking a former client so they could find out where they were taking their business. So Nixium spent that whole day spying on some short, fat businessman from the seat of his car. And because he's a model employee, Nixium even went the extra mile and cyberstalked the client on Facebook. They never found out where the client took his business, but at least Nixium got to roleplay being a private investigator.
Spinal Palm was all ready to go on his first date with his new girlfriend, and he was waiting at the bus stop for her. She didn't get there on time, so Spinal Palm waited a few minutes and then texted her. He didn't get a response, so about half an hour later, he went home. Another 30 minutes after he got home, she showed up at his door.
What? Where were you?
Spinal Palm asked her, concerned. She responded, I was off having sex with another guy. Sorry I was late. So, you want to do it? Spinal Palm ditched her right then and there.
One day, Nixium and his girlfriend were walking when they saw a bird swoop down. Somehow, she got a hold of it and said that it looked delicious and nibbled on it. Nixium freaked out and said,
Ugh, what the fuck, man?
The bird was screaming in pain and was eventually released. He left her, but then hooked back up after he made her clean her mouth out with a whole bottle of toothpaste.
Through most of school, Lady Butt had a couple of bullies. They occasionally called her names, but she didn't let it bother her. Once, when the class went on a school camping trip, there was a garbage truck backing up, and they grabbed her and began pushing her towards it. Eventually, they did let go and she just bolted. Later that day, they threatened to break into her house and kill her cat. She told the principal what happened during the trip and about their threats, and the day afterwards, Ladybot was called into the principal's office, where she found the bullies crying. They gave her handwritten apologies, and they all talked about what happened.
When Tulip was little, he used to live in the poor side of Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. He was 6 years old at the time, and his mother had went to work, and his older brother had gone to the store. He was sitting in his room watching television when he heard a tap on the window, and then on his door. He never took notice until it happened 3 more times. Tulip was getting scared. He went to find the phone, and then he saw a grown man with a terrifying smile. He looked dead to Tulip, who was paralyzed with fear. Then the man ran to the backyard and cut the power, and as a little kid, he felt the world was going to end for him in about 5 seconds. After the power was cut, Tulip heard the window smash in the laundry room. As soon as he heard that, Tulip ran so fast up the stairs that he was practically tripping on his own feet. He ran in his room and he hid under the bed. The man looked for him in all the rooms, cursing and saying he will kill him if he finds him. Then he went into Tulip's room and was laughing like a crazy person. Tulip was crying and wished he would never find him. But the unthinkable happened, and the man grabbed his leg and dragged him out from under the bed. The man held Tulip by the neck, who then kicked him. The man dropped Tulip, who hopped out of the window, and when he landed, he sprained his ankle and he limped to the neighbor's house where he called the police, telling them everything that had happened. When they finally came, his mom was crying, and she was happy that he was okay. And if you're wondering, the police never found the man.
Melissa had a very awkward first date with a guy she met at Match.com. They went out to a restaurant, and all night he kept asking her personal questions like,
So when do you want to get married? Do you want to have kids? When we do have kids, do you want to do it all natural or cesarean? And are you going to breastfeed our kids?
Melissa told him she didn't know and kept eating her food. At the end of the date, the guy walked her to a car. Melissa went to shake his hand, and he grabbed her boobs and said, My God, I can already imagine you feeding our children from these things. Melissa swatted his hand away and said,
That is never going to happen with you.
and she took off. Needless to say, there was no second date.
When Hellbit went to university, he lived in a dorm room with some roommates. He had just finished playing his Xbox and turned it off, and then tried to turn off his TV, which had been malfunctioning for a while now. After a while, he got angry at the broken monitor and started jumping up and down on his bed, yelling at the TV, when one of his roommates opened the door and saw him jumping on his bed. It was at this point Hellbit remembered he was completely naked. His roommate ran straight back out the room before he could explain the situation.
A week ago, MKLM's aerospace engineering class had their Aero Drunks Fest. A guy got very drunk, then got to a friend of MKLM's and asked in a rude manner, "Did you take my vodka?" His friend, because he's an idiot, said yes just for the fun of it. The guy took the friend and one-hit KO'd him. He screamed, "You never take my vodka!" Then he started peeing on him. After that, he sat next to him and started crying, feeling bad for what he did. Almost immediately after that, he passed out. The next morning, none of them knew what happened.
Well, one time in high school, I was messaging a friend online and I happened to have gotten a particular kind of link from him one day, just randomly. I opened the link, and wouldn't you know it, it was some hardcore anal pornography. And I was like, well, this is an interesting thing for him to send me. Usually he doesn't send me hardcore porn, so that's interesting. So I messaged him back and I'm like, WTF, what the actual fuck? And he messaged back and said, yeah, sorry, my dog walked on my keyboard and sent that. And so I took a second, I'm like, your dog went onto a hardcore anal pornography website, Control-C'd the link for it, went back to your messenger, and happened to have accidentally pressed Control-V and then enter. He didn't message me back, and we never talked about it after that. It was a great story, it doesn't make anyone uncomfortable at all.
When Dolan was in 5th grade, he got blamed for a fight he had nothing to do with. He was in a school bathroom when two kids barged in and started fighting each other. Dolan was using the urinal at the time, so he was, kind of exposed. The two accidentally crashed into him while he was trying to wash his hands and escape. They ended up slamming into a paper towel dispenser and breaking it off the wall. This made a lot of noise. A teacher ended up coming in and breaking up the fight. Dolan received a 5-day suspension just for being there. You can imagine him saying,
You stupid jerks. I was just trying to wash my hands. So unfair.
When Dolan and Gooby first started going out, they were at his place watching a movie and cuddling on the couch. It wasn't even a romantic movie, just a good one. And being the witty goofball that he was, he waited for a certain scene to come up. When it did, he got up close and kissed her cheek, then whispered,
I'm gonna glaze you like a donut with my Krispy Kreme factory.
Gooby gave him the best what the fuck face he ever saw her do before bursting into a fit of giggles and laughs. Dolan just sat there looking like an idiot, trying to recover by saying,
That honestly sounded better in my head.
while Ladybot was in school, she was walking to her class with a few of her friends. As they were entering the main building, a senior who was wearing a Bernie Sanders mask decided it would be a good idea to kick the door open while leaving. He kicked the door handle and it swung out and hit Ladybot's backpack. She was lucky to not have been hit in the face. He broke the door handle and some of the teachers started chasing him afterwards. Ladybot thinks that he was probably suspended because she hasn't seen him since.
A few years ago, Andy worked in a hospital emergency unit with a very unprofessional head nurse. One night, a patient came in suffering from smoke inhalation and severe third-degree burns. It was an intense scene, with his family crying their eyes out in the hallway, and the hospital staff literally running around trying to save him. Then, in strolled the head nurse holding a leaflet. She casually looked around and said, "Hey guys, I've been thinking of getting my eyebrows tattooed. Anyone interested?" They have this, really great promotion. Andy and her coworkers stared at her like she was a mental patient. The nurse acted totally oblivious to the burn patient and then kept going on about her beauty regimen. Andy got so mad that she threw the nurse out of the room, even though she was technically Andy's superior. A week later, the worst nurse in the world was fired.
Robo used to work at a Chili's restaurant. She worked not as a server or a cook or a host. No, Robo worked as a silverware roller. Her job was to stand in front of the manager's office for 4 to 7 hours a day, make sure there were 3 forks and a knife rolled into every napkin. For a year and a half of this, Robo was demoted to silverware bagger, where she bagged up silverware as if it was a grocery store. Oh, hey Robo, what do you do for a living? Oh, I roll things. I roll things and I bag utensils. Wow, that's great.
Back when Blockbuster was still open, Doopy would go there with her mom and sister. They knew the stores were closing and wanted to visit them while they could just because. One time, Doopy wanted to rent the Simpsons movie on DVD. While they were discussing it, a random customer came up to her and said, "Why don't you rent this?" The customer was holding up a sign that said, "Rent it tomorrow." Must have been his favorite movie.
One day, back when he was in high school, Legna was doing a group project in class when he had to go to the bathroom. He blasted as soon as he sat on the toilet, but when he finished, he found out that there was no toilet paper. Needing a way to wipe his ass, he said, "Sorry, socks," and took one of them off. He proceeded to wipe his ass with the sock. Just then, one of his classmates entered the bathroom and asked, "Is everything okay?" Legna answered, "I'm vomiting, give me a moment." As soon as his classmate left, Legna tried to find a place to throw the shit-soaked sock, so, without thinking, he threw it out the window, temporarily forgetting that he was 3 floors up. Suddenly, he began hearing people screaming and bad words being uttered. He looked out the window and saw that his sock landed on a girl's head, covering her in his shit. Then her boyfriend and his rough-looking friends marched up the stairs, saw Legna, who was now in the hall, and asked him if anyone was in the bathroom. He said, "I don't know, I'm switching classrooms." Suspicious, they asked him where his backpack was. Busted, Legna confessed. Instead of beating him up, the boys fell to the floor, laughing so hard they began to cry. The girl's boyfriend said, "That was the best favor ever. She's actually been cheating on me." Legna couldn't believe it and began to laugh too, along with other students.
One day a lady came into the nursery where Zaragamba worked. She wanted to buy a tree sapling, and Zaragamba volunteered to plant it for her. So they went to her house, and the lady picked a good place to plant the tree. But when he planted the tree, the lady said, "Too low in the ground. Move it up." He understood and did what she said. Then she told him to move it over, which he did. She then said, "Too far, honey." Zaragamba was getting exhausted, but he ended up having to move the tree all over the yard. When she told him to move it to the other side of her porch, he finally said,
"This tree is gonna die if I move it one more time."
Then the lady told him that she wanted a different tree. Once she got the new tree, Zaragamba spent hours moving it all over her yard.
"This one is gonna die too,"
he said. The lady clenched her fists and yelled, "Why did you move the tree so much? I didn't even want a tree. I said I wanted flowers." After showing her a selection back at the nursery, the lady bought some pink roses. Once again, Zaragamba planted them in her yard 47 times.
"The flowers are going to die,"
he said. "I don't care. I didn't even want flowers. I wanted a tree." It got to the point where Zaragamba went back to the truck and puked. When she was in high school, Princess Proton and her friends were hanging out during lunch break, like they did every day, when suddenly a group of guys appeared and started what looked like a huge fake orgy. They were moaning vigorously, like they were acting out a loud gay porno, but they were still fully clothed. Princess Proton facepalmed, and her friends sat there with their eyebrows 10 meters in the air, completely speechless. After a short while, the guys stopped, laughed it off, and continued on their way. Princess Proton rolled her eyes while their friends were looking at each other, completely perplexed. There was a teacher at Dolan's school who taught geography and PE and was known for being a bit mad. She once slapped the butt of a girl who was doing push-ups, and Dolan was lucky enough to have her for PE. One morning, Dolan and his friend Ghost Toast were chatting in the locker room before class, and the teacher swooped in and said, I had a dream about you two boys last night. She then described the dream. They were obviously horrified, so she said, "What are you looking at me like that for?" "I'm just trying to make a friendly conversation." Dolan and Ghost Toast awkwardly laughed and tried to get away, but she started cackling and slapped Dolan on the back. He made an excuse to leave, and he ran away as fast as he could.